You think the economy is getting better just because the stock market is hitting all-time highs, but the truth is you are getting poorer every single day you spend chasing a number that does not exist. One of the most disappointing things in retirement planning is seeing people who retire when they are told is responsible only to find out after the fact that they could have retired years earlier. Before we dive into the math that will save you a decade of your life, I want you to drop a comment right now with your current age and the amount you are investing every single month. Are you doing $500 or $5,000? Let me know below because your community is your leverage. Now let's talk about why the research I am going to show you today from Vanguard is so frustrating. Despite being well-intended, the way it is written can lead retirees to retire years later than they might need to and end up giving up some of their healthiest remaining years along the way. In today's video, I am going to walk you through that Vanguard research where I think their assumptions break down and how to think about whether you really need to keep working or whether the target you are using is wrong in the first place. Vanguard has this retirement paper called Target Date Strategies and Advice, the impact of saving and spending differences. And this research points people towards thinking that they need to replace something like 75 to 85% of their pre-retirement income before they can safely retire. So that means they need to have generated an amount of savings or an asset pool that is large enough to kick off income that would replace roughly 80% of their pre-retirement income. Say someone is making $300,000 a year before retirement. Well, according to this Vanguard study, they would need around $237,000 a year in retirement income. And then if you try to use something like the 4% rule to estimate what size portfolio they would need, that would end up meaning they need a portfolio of nearly $6 million to retire, which depending on how you measure this, we are probably talking about the top 1% of households in the United States. One market sizing study found that only 1.5% of U.S. households have $5 million or more in investable assets. And so this basically creates a crazy, unrealistic expectation. And so I feel, when I think about this, it is no wonder people are frustrated and either feeling unable to retire or keeping on working beyond the age they would like to. Now, the problem with Vanguard's research is not that replacement ratios are useless. The issue here is that replacement ratios do not actually account for what people really spend in real life. And as a result, people end up thinking they need far larger portfolios than they actually do to support levels of spending they do not actually spend at. And then they spin their wheels building retirement plans that solve for the wrong number. So they stay at a job that drains them, they watch a friend or coworker retire ahead of them and then think, well, I guess I am just behind. In plain English, broad retirement guidance like Vanguard's report can include a lot of good data and still miss the details that help you find your responsible retirement date. So with all that said, if Vanguard's research is not what you should rely on for your retirement analysis, then the question is, what should you use? So for that, let's look at a case study that illustrates a better way to find your retirement number. And I am going to show you this in great detail, so if you would like, you can attempt to do this yourself. Let's put some numbers to this because this is where the Vanguard shortcut really starts to come apart. So let's use a 62-year-old couple before retirement. They make $300,000 per year. So like the earlier example, now at this point at 62, they have $2.5 million saved. They are currently spending about $179,000 per year. Right now, they have no other pensions, no other, income that would come to them. And at full retirement age, their Social Security is projected to be about $52,000 per year once both husband and wife hit full retirement age. So age 67. So far, nothing about this case is unusual, right? It is a pretty normal high-income pre-retiree household. They have saved well. They are not reckless. They are just trying to figure out whether they can stop working. Now, if we use the Vanguard-style replacement ratio, the answer looks pretty terrible. A 79% replacement rate on $300,000 of income means we are trying to create about $237,000 per year of retirement income. Using the 4% rule is a rough shortcut. That points to a portfolio of almost $6 million. Now, they currently have $2.5 million. And so if that is the target, they are not just a little short. They are, maybe you consider it like a lifetime away. And even if they keep saving $55,000 a year, which is what they are currently doing, and even if we assume a 7% growth rate, it will take them about 11 years to get from $2.5 million, where they currently are at $62 to $6 million in portfolio size. So this 62-year-old couple, here's an effect, you can probably retire around 73. Now this is where things stop being an academic debate about replacement ratios, because the natural reaction here is, okay, well, I guess we will keep working, or I guess we need to slash and burn our lifestyle to the ground if we want to retire any earlier. And I think both of those conclusions are extremely damaging, especially because the starting number was wrong. Now, the reason the starting number was wrong here is pretty straightforward. They are not spending $237,000 a year. They are spending $179,000 a year. And even that number is not permanent because about $40,000 of that spending will end up going away 4 years from now when their youngest child finishes college. By the way, you can insert any other of these kind of trickle expenses there. It does not have to be kids' college expenses. Oftentimes, people's mortgages are completed by the point they retire. There is all sorts of expenses, and the research will actually show all sorts of expenses that will drop off as you enter or get into your early part of retirement. Now, that is exactly the kind of thing, though, that a broad research paper is not going to be good at identifying. It is not going to know that part of the spending is temporary, and it is not going to know their exact Social Security amounts. It is not going to know how they would claim Social Security, like what age. It is not going to model a retirement spending smile, if you are familiar with what that is, and it is not going to ask the practical question, which is, if markets get rough, are you willing to make some modest spending adjustments? And that last part matters because let's take the other side of this case study. When I run this same case through modern guardrail software that we use, the plan does not start with income. It starts with spending, and then it layers in the pieces that actually fund the retirement. Future Social Security, college expenses dropping off, the fact that spending does not always move in a straight line, and whether the couple is willing to make some small spending adjustments along the way if the plan were to need it. Under that spending first model, this couple is not 11 years away. They are actually 17 months away. Now, I want to be careful with that because 17 months away does not mean there is no risk in their retirement. That is not what we are trying to say. It means they meet the retire-ready criteria that we would look for, which for this case would be that they have a lower guardrail, which is above 24%. So in this case, it would be a 28% lower guardrail. Not only is their lower guardrail ticking off the box that we care about, this couple also their probability of underspending the plan's resources is above 65%. So in this case, that means 68% of the time when we run the scenarios, they end up never touching or running out of money. And on top of that, this couple has also expressed a willingness to make a small 5% spending reduction if their portfolio ever triggers the lower guardrail. So the conclusion here is not just retire because the software says so. The conclusion is that once we use the right inputs, we have a completely different decision. The Vanguard style model would tell them to work 11 more years. The spending first model, which by the way is way more accurate because it is their actual spending, says you are close, but we may need to manage some guardrails and have some boundaries in place. And at the end of the day, what that produces is a 9.5-year difference. The reason I flag this is because those 9.5 years are not some random theoretical exercise. Those are years where someone may keep working in a job that they are either stressed out, unhealthy, they do not have good management systems, or good bosses, or their company's missions are no longer aligned, or they might just be feeling some assumption that they are behind when the real issue was that they never had the right target for what a retirement target, what dollar amount they needed. And so the practical question here is, if we are not going to use some generic income replacement number, what do we use instead? The way to think about this is retirement is not funded by one giant number. It is funded by a bunch of slices. Think of it like a pie, and those slices do not all show up at the same time. They do not all get taxed the same way. They do not all behave the same way when life changes. And that is why I like thinking about this like a retirement withdrawal pie chart. This forces us to stop asking what percentage of my income do I need to replace, and it forces us to ask instead what pieces of my withdrawal pie chart are actually going to fund my spending. And so the first slice of this pie is the spending need itself. How much do you actually need the withdrawals from your portfolio to fund? Now be careful here because current spending is not always permanent spending. And we just showed that in the case study, they had a current spend of $179,000, but $40,000 of that was tied to college costs that will go away in 4 years. And if you ignore something like that, you are going to build a retirement plan around an expense that may not exist for most of retirement, and then it artificially inflates the size of the portfolio that would be required. The next step after identifying spending is going to be looking at reliable income sources. And for most retirees, the baseline is going to be Social Security. For some people, they might also have pensions, rental income, deferred comp plans, part-time work, whatever, right? It is going to be unique to that person's situation. And the point is not that every income source is equally reliable. The point is that the portfolio is not the only thing funding every dollar that has to be used towards spending. There are other income sources often coming into play. And in our example, this couple does not have a pension, but they do have about $52,000 a year of Social Security income at full retirement age, which changes the job of the portfolio. The portfolio is not trying to recreate a $237,000 post-retirement paycheck. It is trying to fund the gap between what this couple spends in reality and what their other income sources will not cover in retirement. And then the next thing we look at is where the portfolio money is coming from. Is it taxable money? Is it pre-tax, IRA money, or 401k money? Is it Roth? Is it cash? Two households can both have $2.5 million and still have very different retirement plans depending on where that $2.5 million lived. In the case I showed earlier, they had $2.25 million in pre-tax and $250,000 in post-tax. Now, if we flip, I have done other videos on this. If we flip that and they had $2.25 million in post-tax and $250,000 in pre-tax. The odds are they could have retired already. That is how impactful the balance you know of the tax location is for the money you have. The account mix matters because what this couple needs in actual spending varies quite widely based on how much is going to have to go towards taxes. That pie, if you imagine it like a pie, is the total withdrawal amount that a portfolio could support, and that's what some software often tells us. But what we actually do with strategic withdrawal planning is we try to determine how the couple can keep the most of that pie for spending money and give the least of it to taxes. So once we have that kind of conceptual element down, the next thing we need to do is pressure test timing. And this is where a lot of broad retirement guidance often goes wrong. Real retirement spending is not a straight line. There will be higher spending in early years because people are younger and healthier. They will travel more, they will be more active, and then retirement spending will dip as you go into your middle retirement years. And then retirement spending will increase as you get into your later retirement years and healthcare costs mount and assisted living and things like that come into play. So in a real plan, we would want to know, are we solving for a permanent spending need or a temporary spending need or some kind of flexible spending need that is going to change on a progression, and we do not want to guess on that. The last thing we want to look at here is also flexibility, because retirement planning is not just can you run at 10 miles an hour for the rest of your retirement without ever stopping or breaking that pace. Retirement is really about knowing what types of trade-offs you are willing to do. I would want to know what trade-offs I'd have to make if markets were bad early or if markets were great early in retirement. Can we raise our spending? Can we cut our spending in the case study? We showed part of the reason that they were only 17 months away from retirement is because they were willing to make a very small, modest 5% spending reduction. If the plan had hit a lower guardrail, triggered a portfolio reduction of sufficient size that they needed to actually cut spending. That matters because it gives the plan a way to respond, and it does not mean they are promising to slash their lifestyle or their spending forever. It just indicates that we have an adjustment that is defined ahead of time, so the plan is not pretending the retiree has no need to ever adapt. Now, that's a very different exercise than taking your income, multiplying it by 79% and backing into some huge portfolio number and hoping that that works forever. At that point, we are no longer really asking, how do we recreate the paycheck? We are asking, what does this specific retirement need to fund, and can the actual resources you have support it? So my pushback here on Vanguard is not to ignore the research. It is more directly to not let broad research make household-specific retirement decisions for you. Now, before you decide you need to work another 5, 8, 10, 12, whatever number of years, make sure that the number you are actually chasing is actually built around your actual spending, your actual other income sources in retirement, your tax location, the taxes that will be factored in from your account mix, and potential future expense changes, as well as the most important variable, in my opinion, which is the amount of flexibility that you are going to be willing to have in terms of making spending reductions or spending increases. Now, if you want to take this all one step further, the next thing I would look at is to how to actually turn a portfolio into retirement income, because even once you know your retirement number, the next problem is which dollars do you spend first? And why do you pull from taxable accounts? Do you pull from pre-tax? Do you use cash? Why might you do different decisions based on different actual account locations or tax locations? And these decisions can materially change your tax bill. They can materially change the risk in your plan and how much flexibility you actually have once you stop working. If you want to see how we think about actually turning retirement savings into an actual retirement paycheck, watch the next video that is going to pop on the screen right here. You have to understand that the time in the market is your greatest ally, and your biggest enemy is the fear of not having enough, when in reality, you are already there. Most of you watching this are probably already sitting on enough to live a comfortable life if you just stop buying things. You do not need to impress people you do not like. I see people driving $80,000 trucks while crying about inflation, and that is the real tragedy. If you want to retire early, you need to embrace the minimalist lifestyle. Drive that 2006 Toyota Camry until the wheels fall off, and stay away from luxury traps that keep you working until you are 70. Stop being a slave to the consumerist machine and start being a master of your own time. The Vanguard numbers are designed for the average person who wants to spend like a celebrity, but if you are disciplined and you focus on VO or SAG and you maximize your Roth IRA every single year, you are playing a different game. You are playing to win your freedom. Remember that every dollar you save today is a soldier working for your future self. Don T let some generic report tell you that you are behind. Look at your own spending, look at your own taxes, and realize that your freedom might be closer than you think. Don T get discouraged by the big numbers because the big numbers are often a lie. Focus on the gap between what you have and what you actually need to spend. That is the secret to a happy and early retirement. Thank you as always for your time and attention. I hope this helps you realize that you are closer to your goals than you think. Hit that subscribe button. Peace.